Shayna Citron, Shaynacitron.
You may proceed, counsel.
Thank you, Judge. Ma'am, do you know Andrea Sneiderman?
Yes.
And how do you know Andrea Sneiderman?
Andrea and I have been good friends for 9 or 10 years.
How close were you during those 9 or 10 years to Andrea Sneiderman, ma'am?
Very close.
Okay. Did you have the type of relationship with Andrea Sneiderman where you could tell each other anything or everything?
Yes.
Okay. During 2010, did Andrea Sneiderman ever discuss trouble or fights in her marriage with you that existed prior to the murder?
Yes.
What did she tell you?
She told me that there were problems figuring out who was going to be taking the children to.
No. Talk to me about the fights. Were there in fact fights in their marriage?
Yes, there were.
Were they common?
Were they? I'm sorry.
Fights, were they regular?
Were they regular?
The fights she described to you.
I guess some were, some weren't.
Okay. Was there one large fight she described to you?
Yes.
What did she tell you about that fight?
It was after she had come back from one of her trips, work trips, and it was just very stressful, and it was just very stressful.
Did she indicate there was a period they didn't talk?
Yes.
What was the period?
I believe she said it was 1 week.
Okay. But other than that large fight, if I can call it that, there were other fights during that period?
Always centered around who was going to be taking the children to school and activities, ballet, and et cetera, yes.
Yes, ma'am. But that's a yes?
That is a yes.
Okay. Okay.
What is when Mr. Gary asked you what is a fight, what is a fight? I'm trying to make sure I understand what we're talking about. When you use the term fight or disagreement, what are we talking about?
I've never personally seen Andrea and Rusty fight, but from what she has told me, I believe disagreements and verbal communication.
You may proceed.
Yes, Judge. After Andrea told you about the fights or the disagreements, were you concerned for her marriage?
There was a time that I was concerned for her marriage, yes. There was a period of time, but after that period of time, she told me things had started to get better in their marriage. I had suggested to her that they hire a nanny to help out in the evening hours with the children and cooking and dishes and so forth to help her and Rusty, and she said that was helping.
Yes, ma'am. Did Andrea Sneiderman ever state to you that she liked the attention she was getting from her boss?
Andrea's yes.
Okay, you can answer what you want. Just if you can give me a yes or no first, then you can always explain your answer, ma'am.
Yes, I think any professional appreciates it when their boss says they're doing a very good job.
Okay. On or about October 31st, 2010, did you have the opportunity to observe Andrea and Rusty together?
I'm sorry, what date?
October 31st, on or about that date?
What year?
2010, sir.
Yes.
And where was that at?
At my parents' home. Andrea and Rusty have always joined us for Halloween.
Was it a party?
It was a Halloween party, yes. Sorry.
Okay.
And we always have a number of people there celebrating Halloween. And yes, they were there.
During that time, or during that party, did you observe tension between them?
Yes.
On November 18th, 2010, did you receive a phone call from Andrea Sneiderman?
I'm sorry, when?
On November 18th, 2010, did you receive a phone call from Andrea Sneiderman?
Yes.
Approximately what time was that?
My husband and I were in Arizona at the time, and I was on my way to a spa. I was driving to the spa, and it was in the morning.
About what time?
I believe Arizona time. It was around 8:30 in the morning, which I guess it was 2 hours
Been around
behind.
10:30 here in Georgia.
Correct, yes.
Okay. Okay. What were you doing when you received that call?
I was currently driving to the spa where I had never been before. I had never been to Arizona before, so I had my GPS on my cell phone routing me there, and the phone rang. I almost did not answer it. However, something told me to answer it. I don't know why. Anyway, I saw that it was Andrea. Again, we're very close, so I answered it. As soon as I answered it, I started to say, Andrea, I'm en route somewhere, and I need to go. My GPS is going to mess up if I, don't have access to my phone. And she immediately, at the same time, was screaming to me that Rusty had been shot, and she didn't know if he was dead or alive, and she was on the way to the hospital. And then she passed the phone over to her mother.
Okay. Are you sure she said she was still on her way to the hospital?
Yes.
And she told you Rusty had been shot at that time?
Yes.
At some point prior to the murder, did you have the opportunity to discuss with or address with Andrea whether she was having an affair with her boss?
Yes.
Okay. Did Andrea admit or deny the affair with you at that time?
She denied it.
Okay. Did she say anything about her boss at that time?
She said that he was interested in her, and we had a conversation about that. I asked her if she could handle that. Had she told him that she was not interested in him, and she said yes. And
Did she make any comment about if she was not married?
at this particular point in time, when she first told me about her boss, she was going through troubles with her marriage. I know.
No, just, if you answer it, then you can explain anything you want, ma'am. I'm not going to cut you off. Okay? So, did she make a comment about if she wasn't married?
Yes.
What did she say?
Maybe if she was not married, she would have been interested. However, she loved her husband and was not interested.
Okay. At some point in time after the murder, did you have an opportunity to discuss with Andrea whether she was having the affair before the murder? Did you have that discussion again after the murder?
Yes.
Okay. Did Andrea admit or deny an affair with her boss at that time after the murder?
Denied it.
Based on all the time you've known Andrea, based on your observations of her, her mannerisms, when she told you no, did you believe her?
No, but my heart really wanted to believe her.
But you didn't believe her. Thank you, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last. You have to say yes and no for the record.
No.
Thank you, ma'am.
All right. Ms. Peters, going to ask Ms. Peters? You may examine if you wish.
Good morning, Ms. Citron.
Hi.
My name is Doug Peters. I am one of Hemi's lawyers. We've not met before, but I would like to ask you some questions about your knowledge of this case, okay?
Excuse me, ma'am, you have to answer for the record. I know you shook your head, but you have to say yes or no so the court can take down your responses.
I'm sorry. Yes. Okay.
You described for us that there was a time when you had your first discussion with Andrea where she first brought up to you Hemi. Is that correct?
Yes.
And that date was actually September the 1st, 2010, correct?
Correct.
And you know that because y'all remember you went to Fuddruckers for lunch, you charged it on your card, you checked your receipt, so you're sure of that date.
Yes, that is
Is that
correct.
correct?
That is correct.
I'll ask you whether or not in that conversation, whether or not Andrea told you that she had been on a trip with her boss on July the 13th and 14th where they went to Lake Tahoe together. Did she tell you about that in that conversation that you recall?
I do not recall the location. She had told me that she had been on trips with him, yes.
Did she tell you specifically on September the 1st about the trip where he had come and joined her for 3 nights, July 21st through the 23rd in Longmont, Colorado?
No.
Did she tell you that after her trip to Longmont, Colorado, she had made arrangements for Rusty to meet her boss?
I'm sorry, after when?
When you were having lunch with her on September the 1st, did she did not tell you that?
No. Not that I recall.
Yes, ma'am. Did she tell you at this lunch at Fuddruckers on September the 1st about traveling, just she and him, to Greenville, South Carolina on August the 26th together? Did she tell you about that trip?
Again, she did not tell me any specifics about that area. The only trip I ever, do you want me to?
Yes, ma'am.
The only,
You can finish your answer.
Yes, ma'am.
the only trip that I remember her telling me the location of was the London trip.
Which at that time was before that trip took place.
I don't recall.
Don't recall whether she
I
told
don't know
you
when it was. And
whether she was planning it then or not.
oh, I'm sorry. Yes, she probably was planning it then. Does she, I'm having a hard time remembering the exact timeline.
I understand that, but you are sure the lunch was on September the 1st?
I am sure about that particular lunch. There were other times that we had seen each other between September 1st and when Rusty was killed, so I don't recall when exactly she told me about the London trip and preparing for it.
Did she tell you in that lunch that following a trip to Greenville on August 26th, that 3 days following that trip, the 27th through the 29th, that she had sent multiple expressions of guilt over what she and Hemi had done on that night in Greenville? Did she tell you that?
No,
She did not.
no.
You're sure?
Best of my recollection.
She only told you that her boss had been hitting on her. And of course,
You have to answer out loud, ma'am, so the court reporter can record your response. Next question. please.
Yes.
she only told you that her boss had, quote, been hitting on her, and she, of course, rejected that.
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And then discussed the only trip, the upcoming trip to England that she was planning on going on.
Yes.
And she told you that she had responded to her boss, that she was not interested, and that was the end of it. That's what she told you.
That's what she told me.
Let me ask you about these arguments and the fights that the district attorney asked you about. You've told us that they were fighting, they were having problems. You've told us that there were more than one fight. And these fights, she told you, were in part about the children, Sophia and Ian, correct?
Correct.
And I believe she told you that she and Rusty were arguing because now that she was out of the house working, and he was there with the children, that there were problems or stress between them because now Rusty was having to take Sophia to preschool.
Yes.
He was having to take Ian to daycare.
Yes.
He also now was responsible for taking Sophia back and forth to ballet lessons. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And she told you that when she would get home from work, that the children would literally run to her and cling to her,
Yes, that is correct.
and that was troubling to Rusty.
What part was troubling to Rusty? The actually going to pick the children up
Yes.
and so forth. Yes, because he was trying to start a company, and it was just very hard to figure out who was doing what.
And she was quite adamant in describing to you, then when she gets home at the end of the day and the children want to be with her, and then who's going to do dinner, and there became an issue about just time, time with the kids, and
Right.
she explained that to you.
Yes, but she wanted to be with the children
Sure,
and
I
Rusty.
understand.
Don't cut her off. Let her finish your answer. Have you finished your answer, ma'am?
I believe she wanted to be at home with the children and Rusty. It's just they were trying to figure things out, how to get it all done, yes.
She basically told you that she and Rusty were having a hard time.
Yes.
She also told you that there were other things at this point in time that were adding to the stress in their home. She told you that Rusty's career change, his not having a job, also added to the stress that she was dealing with in the home. Is that correct?
Yes. He was supportive, though, of her working. She's always worked ever since I've never known her not working.
But she said that she and Rusty had also argued over the loss of his job, correct?
Yes.
And actually, that's loss of his jobs, plural, because there had been a series of jobs that he had, J.P. Morgan and the others, where he was terminated from those. And she...
One second. You let her answer. Is that
Okay.
Yes.
You were
that's-
aware of it, okay.
Go ahead.
And the discussions between those jobs and attempting to get some type of businesses going or investments, and Andrea working with him as a partner, and none of that had really worked either, correct?
Well, no, I think they work very well together. My understanding is that the two of them worked very well together, and she was directly involved with Star, the company he was starting at the time. She was directly involved with that, and I think she enjoyed working together with him.
But I believe
Is that
you
what she
said that every time there was a career change for Rusty, that it was stressful on Andrea.
Yes.
She told you that she was growing tired of that stress.
She wished that Rusty was fulfilled professionally.
And you've told us that you're a pretty direct person, and you've been a friend of hers for 8 years. Is that correct?
Between 8 and 10, I really don't recall the point in which we actually met.
Okay. And you have lived in the same subdivision, and
Yes.
you knew her very well.
Yes.
And you've indicated that you're a pretty direct person, and that you asked her point blank 2 times when she brought this up about her boss, whether or not anything had gone on between the two of them. And both times she said no.
That is correct.
the day after Rusty was shot, November the 19th, the day after, you had a conversation with Andrea then, and at that point, y'all discussed her boss, and y'all discussed that the first thing that Andrea should say to the police was the information about her boss who had been hitting on her
Yes.
and she had rejected. And y'all discussed that. That was the first thing that came to your mind, you've told us, correct?
That is correct.
And you told her that,
Yes.
and you told her that's the first thing you need to tell them.
Yes.
And you thought that she did, correct?
Yeah, yes.
Because that's what she told you.
Correct.
Did she tell you that when she was interviewed that day, just following the conversation that y'all had, where you told her that is the first thing that you need to tell them, did she tell you that that was not the first thing that she told the police? Did she?
She told me she told the police.
Did she tell you that she never told the police anything until they specifically asked if there was someone who had tried to do anything to break up her marriage? Did she tell you that?
I don't recall.
Okay.
It was a pretty emotional day.
And did she tell you that that question from the police, when she said, yes, my boss, but he wouldn't do anything to break up our marriage, that was an hour and 15 minutes into the conversation where she was being questioned by the police? Did she tell you that?
I don't recall.
Do you remember there being an issue surrounding this time when Andrea called you and told you that Rusty had been shot? Do you remember an issue there that she wanted her computer back? From her office, she was trying to retrieve her computer?
I remember at some point, I believe, if my memory serves me correctly, I think from what she told me, it was Hemi who suggested that he bring her computer or asked if she wanted her work computer. I thought that was strange, and most people did, that why would she want her work computer? Her husband has just been killed.
Because that work computer would have emails and correspondence between she and whoever she'd been corresponding with, correct?
I don't know.
That computer would have confirmation of perhaps transmissions back and forth for trips that she had been planning and arrangements for rooms, wouldn't it? Likely?
I don't know. She never said that to me,
But you remember
but
thinking,
likely.
You remember thinking that was odd, you thought.
Well, because I thought he wanted her to start working, doing some work.
Yeah.
And that I knew she would not have the ability to work right after her husband
It just
was shot.
didn't seem, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Let's not cut her off.
I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Finish your answer.
I thought that he was asking if she wanted her work computer so that she could get some work done. That I did not understand.
The words that she told you that I assume you will never, ever forget. That phone call when you were driving to a spa you'd never been to, when she called you and said, Rusty has been shot.
You have to answer out loud.
You recall
Yes,
that?
yes, I do
Okay.
recall that.
did she tell you in that phone call that all she had been told as of that time, all she had been told was that something had happened to Rusty? Did she tell you that?
I don't. Yes, because the conversation probably went down the path of, what do you mean, what happened? I don't know, I don't know, I haven't been told anything.
Okay. So, you not understanding then
Right.
that all she had been told was that something had happened, therefore her statement to you that Rusty has been shot, you weren't able to say, well, Andrea, what makes you think he's been shot? You weren't able to ask that question, were you?
Did you give a response, or was that a question? I didn't hear anything from you, so
I think it was, I'm not sure, Judge.
I didn't hear that. Maybe
I'm-
court reporter took it down, but I didn't hear it.
I'm not sure.
All right, go ahead. Next question.
If I could have just a moment,
Take as
Your
much
Honor.
time as you need, Counselor.
Thank you.
No problem.
I just have just one moment.
Take as much time as you need. You may continue, Ms. Peters.
Ms. Citron, I believe that when you were interviewed in this case, you also discussed with the investigator, with the district attorney's office, about talking with Andrea towards the end of December, over the holidays, where she told you that she believed that it was Hemi that did this.
I don't remember the timeline, but yes.
Okay. And that she expressed to you that, I believe, I don't want to take anything out of context, but that in looking at the sketches, that's the police artist sketches that were published in the paper, that in looking at those, she kept seeing Hemi's face in those sketches. Is that correct?
Not the face, it was the eyes, is what she said.
The eyes.
But this was, I don't remember the timeline. I think it may have, I don't remember the timeline. I just remember at some point, close to when she went to the police, it was that she recognized the eyes.
When she told you that she thought this was Hemi, she was saying that to you based on her looking at this police drawing, this artist sketch of the suspect, though. Is that the eyes, I think is what you said?
The eyes, yes.
Okay. And those drawings were published within, was it the next day or certainly no more than 2 days after Rusty was shot? Is that correct?
I guess so. I don't
Okay.
remember.
You saw those sketches in the paper,
Yes.
didn't you?
Yes,
I
of
mean,
course.
the entire
Of
community
course.
saw those sketches,
Of
correct?
course, yes.
And they were within 1, 2, 3 days after the shooting, correct?
Correct.
And that was on November the 18th, 2010, correct?
Yes.
And Andrea told you, looking at that sketch, she thought it was Hemi, correct?
But not November 18th.
I understand.
Is not when she said that.
But she said, looking at that sketch, she thought the eyes looked like Hemi, correct?
At some point, that is what she said.
And you are aware that at the point she told the police that, it was January the 4th, 2011, correct?
But I don't know when she told me that it was the
I
eyes.
understand. January the 4th, 2011, almost 6 weeks after those sketches came out, correct?
I suppose so, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any redirect?
No, sir.
Lawyers made Ms. Citron be released, is it Miss or Mrs.? Mrs. Be released and excused from her subpoena.
No objection, Judge.
Any objection?
No objection, Your Honor.
You're free to go, ma'am. Have a good day. Drive safe. Call your next witness.
State calls Donald Sneiderman to the stand.
All right.
I do.
State and spell your name for the record.
My name is Donald Sneiderman, Donald Sneiderman.
You may proceed.
Mr. Sneiderman, do you know Rusty Sneiderman?
Yes, sir.
And how do you know Rusty Sneiderman?
He is my son.
Can you tell us when Rusty Sneiderman was born?
July 18th, 1974. June 18th, not July.
And do you remember the day that he died?
Yes, sir.
What day was that?
November 18th, 2010.
How old was Rusty on that day?
36.
Did Rusty have any children?
Yes, he had 2. Boy, 2 then, and a daughter, she was 5 then.
What are their names?
Sophia and Ian.
Your Honor, I'm showing opposing counsel, State Exhibit number 75.
75, yes, sir.
Yes, sir. May I approach
You
you?
may.
I am showing you what has been previously marked as State Exhibit number 75. You can take a look at that and tell me if you recognize it.
That's a picture of Rusty.
That a fair and accurate representation of Rusty while he was living in life?
He had a bigger smile most of the time, but yes, that's a fair representation of him.
Your Honor, I would ask to tender State's Exhibit number 75 in the evidence.
Any objection?
No objection.
75 is admitted without objection. You may publish it to the jury.
Was your son, would you classify your son or characterize your son as a responsible adult?
Yes, sir.
How was he with money?
How was he responsible?
How was he with money? I'm sorry.
With money?
Yes, sir.
He was terrific. I taught him well.
What's your profession and your background, sir?
I'm a retired certified public accountant.
And what exactly was it that Rusty did?
He saved his money, invested it wisely, didn't make a lot of foolish money decisions, ever.
Was he a good provider for his family and children?
Absolutely.
Are you aware of Rusty's financial state at the point that he died?
Yes, sir.
Can you tell us about it?
He and I shared, I did his tax returns and stuff like that, but we had a mutual stockbroker, and the stockbroker's a client and a friend of mine, so we talked, Rusty and I would talk about what to invest in and what to do with his money. So I knew all about his money.
Are you familiar with how much money he had?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
He had about $1.1 million between he and Andrea and the kids and their retirement accounts and everything.
Was that in cash?
No, some was in cash. Most were in securities that they invested in.
Was Rusty having financial trouble at the time that he was killed?
No.
I want to ask you some questions about November the 18th of 2010, the day that Rusty was killed.
Okay.
How did you find out that Rusty had been shot?
Around 9:30 in the morning, Andrea called us, and she called and said Rusty had been shot. And she was so sorry, and that she was going to Dunwoody Prep to find out what had happened.
Are you sure it was around 9:30?
Well, we had talked to Rusty over the internet about 9, and he had gone to school. He had taken Ian to school just a little before 9, so it was about 9:30.
And she said she was on the way to Dunwoody Prep.
Yes, sir.
Did she tell you she had been to the hospital or anything like that, or that she was just on her way to the school?
She was just going to Dunwoody Prep to find out what had happened.
And are you sure that she told you that Rusty had been shot?
Yes, sir.
All right. What number did Andrea call you at?
She called our home at 216-464-4260.
After you got this phone call from Andrea, what did you do next?
Well, we waited a little bit, waited for her to call back. And about 15, 20 minutes later, I called Dunwoody Prep on the phone. I identified myself and asked them again what had happened. And the lady who answered the phone there said that Rusty had been shot.
What did you do next after you found that out?
Someone gave me a phone number for the Atlanta Medical Center there, somebody at Dunwoody Prep. I sent an email to my son, Stephen, who was on his way to Hawaii for vacation, figuring that his BlackBerry would pick it up somewhere en route, and he did. We told him that Rusty had been shot and decided that he should go on to Hawaii because we had no idea what his condition was. And I called the Atlanta Medical Center, and I spoke with a doctor there who got permission from somebody to tell me that Rusty had died. Said that Rusty had been shot multiple times and could not survive.
Once you found this information out, did you make your way to Atlanta?
Yes, we flew to Atlanta that afternoon.
And when you got to Atlanta, can you tell us what you did?
We went directly to Rusty's house to be with Andrea and the kids. And we were there.
Did you make funeral arrangements?
The next day we made funeral arrangements.
And where was the funeral?
He was buried at Arlington Memorial Park in Sandy Springs, and the Dressler Funeral Home took care of it.
Do you recall the funeral?
Do I recall the funeral?
Yes, sir.
It's kind of a blur, but yes.
Let me ask you some questions about the funeral. Is there a particular ceremony that takes place during the funeral where dirt is thrown on the grave?
Yes.
Okay. What's the meaning of that?
It's a sign of respect. It's an act that the mourners do for the person who is being buried because it's the only act that that person can never do in his lifetime. I can't do it because I don't have the stomach for it, but lots of people do.
At Rusty's funeral, were there people that threw dirt on his grave?
Yes, sir. Lots of them.
Do you remember any of the people, or was it just a blur?
It's just a blur.
Okay. Let's move forward a little bit. After the funeral, was there a Shiva?
Yes, sir.
Can you explain to us first of all, what the word Shiva means in Hebrew?
It's 7 days of mourning. It's done in the home. People come and visit you, express their condolences. There are evening and morning services in the home. And it's just a time of quiet and mourning.
Is there Shiva etiquette?
Shiva etiquette?
The way that one is supposed to behave at a Shiva?
You're supposed to be quiet, respectful. Family sits on low chairs as a sign of mourning.
I want to ask you some questions about Rusty Shiva. Were there a lot of people there?
Yes. Rusty had lots of friends.
Where was the Shiva held?
In his home.
At Rusty's home?
Yes.
At Rusty's Shiva, do you recall meeting someone named Hemi?
Yes.
Can you tell us how you met Hemi?
My wife introduced him to me. Talked to him for about 30 seconds. I recognized the name that Rusty had told me he was Andrea's boss, that he had tried to look for a job for him. But That was in about 30 seconds or so.
Do you remember what, if anything, Hemi said to you?
No.
Did he shake your hand?
Yes, sir.
And did you shake his?
Yes.
Do you see Hemi in the courtroom today?
Yes, sir.
Can you identify him for the jury?
He's sitting over at the defense table, third one from the right.
Thank you. No further questions, Judge.
No questions from Mr. Scott.
All right. Lawyers, may this witness be released and excused from the subpoena?
Yes, Your Honor.
No objection.
So you come down. Thank you.